Hi everyone, this is Sam from Sam Massage Therapy. With me today is Anna Curtis. Um, Anna is with me today to talk about postnatal rehab and her own journey. We're going to specifically talk about pelvic floor dysfunction and diastasis recti. Um, I met Anna about a year ago at a women's health conference, and we got chatting, and I was fascinated by Anna's postnatal journey. On paper, Anna is someone who you would imagine would just bounce back from pregnancy. She's got a very active lifestyle. She works in the fitness industry. She's very healthy, but unfortunately, Anna had several issues postnatally, including sort of prolapse, umbilical hernia, so that's a hernia around the belly button, and diastasis of the abdominal muscles, so a tummy gap, effectively, where the tummy muscles don't come back together. So I think what we want to really kind of portray was these are all things which may or may not be able to be prevented, but Anna's journey is a really interesting one because it's the rehab side which initially was quite difficult for her. And the difficulty was because there wasn't the information out there for Anna to tap into to know how, what symptoms to look out for and what to do about these symptoms and what these symptoms might mean. And this is something I think which is wrong with our society. It's all about the pregnancy, it's all about the birth, and very little information about the right way postnatally to rehab our bodies, to heal our bodies, what we should do if we present with any symptoms. So listen to Anna today and, listen to how she went about her postnatal rehab journey, considering that she had quite an unfortunate journey, if you don't mind me saying so, Anna. And the things she did, it's really, really interesting, the kind of multipronged approach which Anna eventually took to getting herself back to where she wanted to be. Anna, I hope that kind of sums up the picture, and if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on today, Sam. It's been great to connect with you again. As Sam mentioned, I have had quite a journey. So my first pregnancy was, or my first birth was 5.5 years ago, and like Sam, now I work in the women's health area, in fitness and in massage. But back then I didn't. I was just starting to embark on that area, and I didn't know what I know now. So I had a very happy pregnancy. I had very easy birth, wonderful water birth that, no assistance, nothing. You couldn't want for more from your birth. And you expect from that to come out of it, bounce back and get on with things with your new baby and get on with life. And as Sam said, I led a very active life prior to having children. So one of the first things that I did following my first pregnancy was as soon as I'd had my GP check, is I jumped straight into exercise. Didn't really know the do's and don'ts back then. So I went along to fitness classes, and because I'd always been so strong and because I felt great after my birth, I went straight into doing lots of things that I shouldn't have been doing that early on. And very quickly I realised that things weren't quite as right as I had hoped. And the first thing that I realised was I went running at about 8 weeks post-birth, and I was leaking urine, and I was devastated. And I thought, what's happening? I haven't had anything go wrong during my birth. Why should this be happening to me? And long story short, it took me 18 months to get a referral to a women's health physio. And part of the reason that I got that referral was because during that process, during that time frame, I had started my journey training in the women's health side of fitness. So I started to learn what is out there for you, and I had to push for it. Many women aren't like me and don't have that knowledge, and so go about their lives with their new baby suffering with these symptoms and just accept it. And it's something that I feel very passionate about. It's something that we shouldn't just accept. There is help out there for everybody, and we need to be able to access that help easily, and we can't.
Yeah.
So also as part of that journey, I discovered that not only did I have pelvic floor dysfunction, as Sam mentioned, I had a diastasis, separation of my tummy muscles, and all these things are fairly linked in that they're all part of your core unit. So we often think of our core as our six-pack muscles, our rectus abdominis, but actually our core unit includes our pelvic floor, our deeper core muscles, our diaphragm, and they all need to work together to create a functional core, and mine wasn't working in that way, and they were causing me these symptoms.
Brilliant. Okay, so could you, for our listeners, maybe describe a bit about what pelvic floor dysfunction is?
Certainly. So I mean, in a nutshell, pelvic floor dysfunction is when your pelvic floor muscles don't work correctly. Your pelvic floor muscles are there to support your internal organs around your pelvis. They are sort of the basin of your torso. And if they're not working correctly, then you can suffer from urinary incontinence, you can suffer from fecal incontinence, you can suffer from prolapse, you can suffer from pelvic pain, you can suffer from back pain. So just going back slightly, prolapse. So prolapse is when your pelvic organs start to protrude from your vagina. And this is something that I also suffered with. So I had my bladder and bowel were prolapsing. They weren't bad, so some people have it a lot worse, but they were still prolapsing. And again, I didn't really appreciate that this is something that could happen. I've never really heard of prolapse before.
We associate with older, generation.
Yeah, definitely. And similarly with incontinence, people think it's something that happens when you have a baby, you've got to get on with it, or it's something that happens to older people. But actually, all of these problems can happen to anybody, people who haven't had a baby. They can happen because of the way we lead our lives. Men can suffer with tummy separations. It doesn't happen just because you've had a baby. It can happen just because you're not using your body in the correct way. So although these things are much more common in women who have had babies, it's not just because of having a baby and having given birth.
Yeah. And talk us through a little bit about then your journey of rehabbing. So it took you 18 months to get a women's health physio referral. Yes. What happened from that point?
So it was still an interesting journey. So my first referral, it was a little bit, I didn't really quite get what I needed from it. I was referred on the NHS, and I think the NHS has a fantastic, it gives us fantastic things, but as so many areas of the NHS, women's health is very stressed for time and resource. And so I didn't really get enough care from the NHS. Perhaps I could have pushed more on that side, but I was lucky in that I was in a position where I could pursue the private physio route. Right. And that is what I did. And as soon as I started pursuing that route, I was working with an amazing women's health physio. And actually by this point, I was expecting my second baby. And she worked with me during my pregnancy to prevent my symptoms getting any worse, or as much as we could. And she did an amazing job. Not only did or we did an amazing job together. It was partly me having to do the work, but being guided by the correct person. And not only did my symptoms not get worse, but while I was growing a baby inside me, my symptoms actually improved.
Right.
And I came out of my second birth, another amazing birth experience, no problems at all, another water birth. And I came out of my second birth with my pelvic floor symptoms in a much better position than when I went into the pregnancy, which was amazing. I did come out of that pregnancy with a much larger tummy separation, so that was significant. I had, at the point of checking, which was probably about 6 or so weeks after the birth, my tummy separation was around 6 fingers wide.
Right.
So it was significant.
Yeah.
Whereas after my first birth, it was only about 2 fingers wide. So, you know, a big difference there. Both can cause problems. But I worked hard with my women's health physio the second time round. Straight after I'd had my check from my GP, I went to see her, and she assessed my pelvic floor and she assessed my tummy, and then we worked on a program to get me back to health. And it's been a long, slow journey. But I went into this second pregnancy saying to myself that I was going to come out and I was going to do exactly what my physio told me. I was giving myself over to the rehab.
So there's some interesting points here. I think sort of before you maybe tell us a little bit about the approach that this physio took, can you explain why? I mean, I think more and more we're learning about, you know, diastasis, and it's reaching the, you know, I get mums coming to me asking me about it all the time. So the word is out there. But how would you explain to someone why the diastasis may or may not be important?
Certainly. So if you have a gap in your tummy muscles, you may not be able to control the pressure in your tummy well. So as you move about your day-to-day life, you need to be able to control pressure to prevent things like pelvic floor dysfunction, to prevent hernias, and to remain healthy, to give yourself, to make sure that you've got a good back. It's an indication of a functional core.
Right. Okay.
So there's been a lot of people get very hung up on the size of the gap, but actually it's been shown that that isn't necessarily the important thing. It's whether you are able to manage the gap in a functional way. So whether you can transfer loads well, without problems such as what we call doming. And I've got a little video that I can show you, if that's okay now, to show you what I mean by doming. I'll just get this up on the screen. Can you see that there?
Yes. Fabulous.
So this little video, I'm doing a little exercise. It's a very simple exercise. All I'm doing is pulling an exercise band from the door, pulling it the band down by my sides. Now, initially in the video, you can see I get this doming appearance here, and you can see my hernia popping out. And in that second clip, you can see that you don't get that doming. I'll play that again in just one moment. And what's happening in the first bit is I am not managing my intra-abdominal pressure, as we call it, well. I'm getting a lot of pressure going through the abdominal wall. In the second clip, I am actually using just a breath in a certain way, and you can see you've got much more control of that pressure.
Okay, so interesting here. So if you are doming on the abdominal walls, as in the first one, then you are likely to be doming through the pelvic floor as well.
Potentially, yes. Yeah. It's showing that basically your body isn't managing the pressure well.
Yeah.
And it may go down, it may just go forward. It's just saying that something isn't right.
Yeah. And then in the second clip, I think it's careful to note you're not pulling in as such. You know, it's not that you are bracing and kind of holding everything in. It's just that the breath has changed. Because I think a lot of people will do this whole tummy sucking thing in.
Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I am a little bit there because I have a tendency to do that anyway. That's my natural thing. And that's actually something I'm having to teach myself not to do, because actually by pulling my tummy muscles in, I am working the wrong muscles. I'm not working the deep core muscles that's going to give me a good, strong, functional core. I'm using much more superficial muscles.
Right.
So the muscles that are around the sides a little bit more, called your obliques. And I'm pulling those, I have a tendency to pull those in, and I do that in that clip a bit, but I shouldn't. So just in case anyone who knows what they're looking for is looking at that, I am pulling my muscles in, but I shouldn't be. And you can get that same effect, that same pulling in effect, just by using your breath and your pelvic floor and diaphragm all together in a functional way. And you'll get that drawing back of the tummy just by using your breath.
So this leads nicely onto, I think, one of the key points. Presumably, a lot of the physio work that was done with you was purely on breath, or had a huge focus on the breath.
So, I mean, that's a really important starting point for recovering your core post-birth, recovering your pelvic floor, recovering your tummy muscles. A lot of women after they've had a baby, and actually a lot of us anyway, don't breathe well. And I know you have worked with a lot of people on their breath, and I work with a lot of my clients on their breath. And I see men who don't breathe in an optimal manner. And if you think about when you're pregnant, everything gets pushed right up, all your internal organs gets pushed up under the rib cage. Your diaphragm gets shoved up higher, and it's stuck up there, stuck up under your ribs for a prolonged amount of time. And when we've had the baby, often it doesn't all come down nicely. Our diaphragm has been spent so much time in that tightened position that it's not able to work well. And as such, our breath is often stuck up in our chest. And a functional breath, we want to be using our ribs, and we want to be taking it down into our belly, but not pushing our belly out, not forcing our belly out. Okay, so we do work, and physios work a lot with women in those early stages on using their breath, and using their breath with movement.
Yeah. So that's obviously one of the key things that she worked with you. What other areas did she focus on? So if we take a kind of multi-pronged approach, and breath is one of them, what else was involved?
So I think something that was really interesting to me as I went on my own personal journey, and also my educational journey into women's health, is that it's not all about just your pelvic floor muscles doing Kegels, and it's not all about doing sit-ups, and actually it's not at all about doing sit-ups. It's probably one of the worst things we could be doing. For a lot of people, it should be about taking a global approach to the rehab. And my physio worked with me from head to toe, really, and still does. I still work with another excellent women's health physio, and we're looking at my glutes firing, so the big muscles in my bottom. We're looking at how I move. We're looking at the flexibility in my upper back. We're looking at how I hold my body, how I sit. We need to be thinking about nutrition. We need to be thinking about how we're living our day-to-day life, whether we're getting enough rest, how we go into the toilet, how we sit on the toilet. All these things are a really important part of recovery post-birth, whether you have problems or not, whether you have symptoms or not. We should all be taking these things into consideration. And certainly we worked on my pelvic floor muscles. And interestingly for me, and a lot of people, it wasn't initially about strengthening them. I had to learn to release them. So my pelvic floor muscles were actually really tight.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn to release them and then strengthen them. So a lot of people are told, if they suffer with leaking, go away and do your Kegel exercises. For people like me, and it's very common, if I had just been doing my Kegel exercises, I would have certainly not got any improvement, but possibly would have had, things would have got a bit worse. So I had to learn to what we call down train them. I had to learn to strengthen and activate my glutes, and I had to learn to move much better.
Interesting. Okay. And presumably within that as well, the physio did quite a bit of soft tissue, which
Yes.
another word for massage work, releasing out ribs,
exactly.
diaphragm, and abdominal muscles.
So soft tissue work is another, as you say, really important part to the journey. And both my physio worked on me, and I also sought help from another massage therapist who specialised in women's health. And that played a really important part in my journey to recovery as well. And again, not just working on the abdominal muscles and the diaphragm, but actually also working on muscles globally and fascia globally, because we are just all linked. Our body is linked. You know, the ankle bone is connected to the neck bone. We need to really be looking at this from a multi-pronged and a global perspective.
So where are you now in your journey? So how old is your youngest?
So my youngest is 1.5 years.
Right. Okay.
I am still on my journey.
Yeah.
About 6 or 8 months ago, I did get to the stage where I was returning to running, which was fantastic. It was a slow journey, but I got there. I did start to get a little bit distracted by life, and my rehab exercises started to fall off. And so now I'm not running again, because it's something that I know that I need to be aware of all the time, and I need to make sure that my body is functioning properly all the time. And it's very easy to sink back into bad habits, and when you do that, for me, I started getting symptoms again. Not everybody will, but for me, I did. So I'm back on the sort of focused journey of sorting this out and taking it seriously.
I think you've got an amazing photo of the sort of before and after shot of sort of how belly has improved.
Certainly.
I think, for our viewers, they might relate to that feeling of, and I hate this word, but a kind of poochy belly postnatally.
Yeah.
And that feeling, and I don't take this the wrong way, Anna, of like feeling as if you still look like pregnant.
Yeah.
And this is beautiful how through some very, very I want to say gentle work, but obviously you've had to put a lot of work into it. But we're talking, not doing the kind of classical exercise work that people might associate with postnatal kind of, I need to get my tummy back, therefore I'm going to do sit-ups and strengthen my core in the traditional sort of old-fashioned way, but a really different approach to it.
Definitely. And I think kind of, so I'm just talking this picture over very briefly. I mean, this picture here, the first one is of me, I think I was probably already about 6 months postnatal there. So that is already improved from where it was. And then this is earlier this year. So probably a bit less than 18 months after the birth. So you can see the significant improvement there. It is a really hard thing to deal with, I think, so I've always had a flat tummy. I've never had to work on it. I'm just one of these lucky people who's got good genes, and plus I enjoy being active, which helps.
Yeah.
And then going from that to having this poochy tummy where you kind of feel pregnant all the time, it's a really hard thing to deal with. But at the same time, I'm not going to let it bother me too much, because it is my body now, and it is improving, and I'm still working on improving, and I still know I've got a way to go to help it. But actually for me, and I know not everyone's going to be able to feel this, but for me, as long as my body can can function in the way it should,
yeah,
I'm kind of happy. You know, I have accepted sort of in my own mind that I'm never going to have that same tummy that I used to have. And that's fine. And it's about going on a journey of acceptance, I think, as well as doing the right exercises and getting the right support with soft tissue and diet and everything like that to be able to make the improvements. I'll just bring up another photo as well that's kind of shows me from a different angle, that I think really helps to see the tummy separation. Can you see that?
yes, yeah,
I can't actually see it on. Oh, there we go. So again, this is the same stages, but here you can really see there's that separation in my tummy muscles there, and it's I've still got a big separation, but it's really significantly improved. And as you said, Sam, that it wasn't through doing sit-ups, it wasn't through doing the traditional core exercises, it was through doing much more global work with my body, learning to reconnect with the correct muscles, and avoiding all the things that you feel that you want to go to, like the sit-ups, and for me as well, the running. So I know a lot of mums, as soon as they've had their baby, they want to get back into running because that's a quick and easy way to lose the weight. But actually, if I'd done that the second time round, I would have ended up with all sorts of problems in addition to what I've got now.
yeah,
So it's about taking it slowly. And while we may only have a certain amount of time on maternity leave and people are focused on that, we've got the rest of our lives with our bodies. And we need to give it the respect that it deserves, to give it the time to recover after the journey it's been on, after the journey we've been on, growing babies and birthing babies. And, you know, maybe you're not going to be back into the same size clothes that you had before your baby immediately, but does it really matter? You know, I feel really strongly that it's much more important that we take our time and do it properly.
absolutely. And I think, you know, I'm always reiterating to clients that it's a long, slow journey in terms of, you know, if you rush things at the start, then you potentially might create problems further down the line. So
it can be a long, slow journey. And, you know, I think that's really something to highlight, is that everybody's journey is different. For some people come out of pregnancy and birth without any problems. Some people come out with some problems and bounce back relatively quickly. But for some people, it is a long, slow journey. And it's about not comparing yourself to other people and doing what is right for your body and putting the work in as well, because a lot of people don't want to put the right work in or struggle to put the right work in. So it's about trusting the people you're working with, that they know what they're talking about and doing what they advise you to do, because they are there to help you and know what they're talking about.
Yes, and I think this is where we go back to the fact that education is key. You know, if you don't know about these symptoms, how will you know what to do if these symptoms present themselves? So, as you said, some people might never get symptoms and it might sail through, and you know, and it's fantastic. Yeah. But if we don't have the education out there, because we don't want to create a fear culture, and we don't want people to live in the what if culture either.
Definitely.
You know, but we just want people to know that, you know, if you go back to running and this happens, then you need to take a step back and try some, you know, and go and seek help first. It's not saying that you might never run again. It's just that, like, running at that time is not the right thing.
Yeah. And it's about taking your journey back into fitness, be it running or whatever, gradually. So, you know, test your body out a little bit. And I think, I don't know, this is quite a good time to mention that in France, every woman post-birth gets access to pelvic floor physiotherapy. Okay. And there's a big campaign at the moment in the UK by a group called Pelvic Floor Patrol, who are trying to make it a standard of care in the UK as well, that every woman should have access to a women's health physio after birth. And actually, some people won't know whether they've got pelvic floor dysfunction until they've been assessed by a women's health physio. Yeah. Some people won't know, or most people won't know whether they're okay to go running until they've either been assessed by a women's health physio or have started running and have got symptoms. I think one of the key things is if you do get any symptoms in whatever you're doing, be it running, be it
washing the dishes,
sneezing. Basically, symptoms are there telling your body that it's not ready to be doing what it's doing at that time, and you shouldn't ignore them. You should go and do something about it. And it's, as you say, educating people that there is help out there to help you with these things, and people just aren't aware of it. I talk about my problems a lot. At school, I talk about it with school mums. I talk about it with people I meet, and actually the number of people who have said to me, "Oh yeah, I've got these problems. Can I have the number of your women's health physio?" And it's such a common thing, but people just don't know that there is something they can do about it. And it's about getting that message out there.
Absolutely. Anna, this has been fantastic. Anything you want to add? Anything we haven't covered?
I don't think so. I could talk about this topic for hours.
If you had done things differently, just as a last point, was there anything you could have done to prevent, or was it just this case that having the education is key and that you wouldn't have, after the first pregnancy, returned back to exercise?
So there's certainly things that I potentially could have prevented from myself. So, for example, my umbilical hernia, and I got that through doing the wrong exercises when I wasn't ready to be doing them too early. But I think the key thing is these things can happen to anybody, and you can do so much to try and prevent them. You can work on your core in a safe way with people who know what they're talking about during pregnancy, to minimize to make sure that you're in a good position to recover after birth. Work on your pelvic floor during pregnancy, before pregnancy even, to make sure that you're in a good place to recover. It doesn't mean that you won't get problems, but it will leave you in a good place to recover. But I think the key thing is it can happen to anybody. It happened. I've had people say to me, "Oh, I'm not going to have problems because I've always had a strong core." I had a strong core. I still had problems. I've had people who have never done any exercise at all before, don't really look after themselves, don't have any problems. So there are things that can be done, working with the correct people to help prevent problems getting worse. But at the end of the day, it's a little bit of a luck of the draw as to whether you do suffer or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's about what you do afterwards as to how your journey is going to be.
Fantastic, Anna. Thank you so much for coming in today and talking.
Thank you.
It was lovely having you on, and obviously, it's lovely that you're in a position where you are happy to share this journey, because not everyone would want to.
No. I feel it's important. I feel it's my calling.
But you've obviously, you've done fantastic well, and it's fantastic that you're able to share this with your own clients and pass this knowledge on to help others. It
also makes me more aware of how my daughter leads her life as well. So I think that's another important education thing. The way she's
in denial for years.
Sorry?
She'll be in denial for years.
Yes.
Right, Anna, thank you so much for coming in today, and hopefully catch up with you again soon.
Definitely, I'd love to. Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.